Hello again and welcome to another episode of Rant. And today I've got a special guest with me. That is Chris Hoffman.
Hello.
And Chris Hoffman is snacking. What are you snacking on?
Almonds.
Almonds, the best.
Yeah, best in front of a microphone. Very loud.
Better than crisps.
Yeah.
And I'm snacking on decaf caffeine.
Mm.
Chris, this is your Insta.
Yes.
What the fuck?
Yeah. It's a horrible place.
Tell me, what is it that you do and why does it have to look like this?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. It's just mostly experiments to learn and find out what you can do with modern technology or not so modern technology. Everything.
And so enlighten me. What is it that you can do with modern technology, and especially more interesting, what is it that you cannot do with modern technology?
I don't know. I think you can most probably do anything you want, unless it's a traditional technique. Then probably use all the traditional techniques. But I think there is this notion of it gets easier and easier to do realistic stuff or realism
photoreal stuff.
Yeah, photoreal stuff. And by easier, I don't mean it is actually easy because it still works, but it is more accessible, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And my interest is not realism. I like to look at it, and I'm like, it is fascinating how some people get into the details that much and get like a kick out of getting the crispy details out of stuff, but that is not me. So I'm more like broad strokes. Okay, what can we find? Can we find new aesthetics or aesthetics that, like, for me personally are interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So the Instagram is mainly personal experiments. There's not a lot of work.
So maybe for people who do not know you or are not familiar with your work. So, I mean, I'm seeing, I've recently, or in the last year or so, seen lots of this style here. But maybe let's go a bit into your history, where you come from and how that all developed and what we're actually seeing here. So I got to know you when we worked together and you were still in traditional CG, 3D.
Yeah.
But before that, let's start even before that.
Yeah, so I started, well, obviously I went to school, and did all of that. I didn't do the, what is it called?
A-levels.
Because probably too lazy.
Probably.
Yeah, but I did like more applied stuff. And then I started working in the first studio when I was 17 or 18, I think. So that's where I started.
And in which position did you start working at that studio?
As an intern at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then as a, I think, junior artist was what it was called. And at that time it was only After Effects, so it was only 2D. I didn't touch any 3D program apart from ZBrush, actually, because ZBrush is my first 3D program.
That was your first 3D program?
Yeah, which is obviously... I still love it, but it's very hard to use anything else after ZBrush because it's like nothing else. But yeah, I still love it. It's a great app. But you know, there's like Maya, Blender, and Cinema 4D. They look a little bit more similar to each other.
Yeah.
And ZBrush is this like complete clown that is like out of everything else. So yeah. But it was more like accessible for me, not coming from 3D.
And what was it that drove you personally, or that intrigued you about this medium personally?
The digital medium?
Yes.
I always thought that, I mean, now it's much more the reality than it was back then, but this whole notion of you can do anything with just this one machine, like it's audio, it's visual, you can write on it, you can, like, you have all the stuff you need with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the laptops, of course, that is really a reality. And that was always the dream, because wherever you are, you can create stuff. So, Yeah.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong there, but you focused on character design from the very beginning, or did that develop?
Well, I was always interested in like characters because I'm like a big fan of all this anime and Japanese kind of culture of characters and how they are used to tell stories, and in a, let's say, not traditional way, but they just exist. Obviously, religiously, they have a lot more tiny characters in their culture than we have. We have this one guy, and they have like all these. So it makes a lot of sense that they have like a lot of these tiny, and not just as a medium. I think they are just very rich. Like they are basically like tofu, so you can do whatever you want.
And you connect to them on a very, very basal, very, very deep level, kind of very, very instinctual level, I think. Or I have the feeling that makes it... I'm not saying it makes it easy to do character design, but it makes it easier for us to form a connection to it.
Yeah, but you would also not... I wouldn't call myself a real character designer. Like I think there's still a little bit of my mind. My characters are much closer to like sculptures than they are to like a fully formed backstory character. All that stuff. It's again a bit probably my attention span that I can't stay with one of them for too long. So I'm just doing more and more and more and more, and I never really go down the whole road.
So if pressed, how would you describe yourself, or what title would you give yourself?
Yeah, it's a hard one actually. I'm always like struggling a little bit with that whole, because I can feel myself putting myself into a box while talking if I try to describe myself. So I'm not really a big fan of this. Like, I am not really able to actually do it because it's changing so much. But it's generally, I think, a curiosity of finding all the work I'm doing. I'm trying to hit like a space where it is like eerie, but not like it's uncomfortable, but it's still interesting enough that you stay with it. So it kind of serves the edge of something that is new. There's this curve, actually. I forgot the name about it. What the name was. There's this name of this curve where something is familiar enough, but also new, but not so new that it is alienating. So it is like there's this sweet spot where it's new and interesting, but it doesn't alienate you.
I think that's from economics research, right? When it comes to innovation.
Yeah, there's like, what is it called? The Wund curve. The Wund curve is what it is called, I think. 1 second. I will... Is it that? Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. WUNDT. Okay.
So you want to end up here, kind of. Like a positive response, right? And then if it's too complex and unexpected, you can't follow it anymore. Can people see that if I point?
I think roughly, and I'm switching between this and like the screen cap here. So if you use the mouse, actually people can see it really decently.
That makes more sense. So here it's obviously too complex, and it's not, you can't follow it. And here is like where it's interesting, where it's like new and you have a connection to it, or you have, at least you can follow it.
That is really interesting. I'm seeing this so often in the university context when I'm teaching. That's a good curve.
Yeah,
that is a good curve.
It is a good curve. There's different versions of it. Like there's like there's also more modern ones, but I don't know where to find them. But yeah, in like the base of it is always the same. It's like, it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So you have to give people like an entrance point. And I always thought this way, but I never knew the name of this curve.
Yeah.
And I actually learned about it from another speaker at an event that I was at in Stockholm. But I don't have his name now on, but we will post it under the thing, hopefully.
Hopefully, we'll find it. If you could go back to your portfolio, and I want to touch on your work a bit more. So that's when I mean, we don't have to scroll all the way down, but I met you when you were working, quote unquote, traditionally, whatever that means, in a 3D medium. So ZBrush, Cinema 4D, Houdini, and Unreal, I think, were your tools back then. And then at some point you started diving more into AI stuff.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So maybe we go back to... It's not like I didn't post the first ever things I did with it, but...
maybe the very or the earlier things that you deemed worthy to publish.
So this is like the first ever model I fine-tuned myself. So this is actually already a little bit more advanced. But I started, I don't know how long ago that was, but it was just like really code-based and very hard to access, at least for me as a non-coding person.
So that was all done in Python then, or what?
Yeah,
how did you pull it off?
This was like Python and all the like Colab notebooks.
Yeah.
So it's like Jupyter notebook.
Yeah.
Notebooks. And I learned all that stuff basically reading the code, and also there were a few tutorials, people that already did stuff, but not too many. I didn't know what the learning rate was. I didn't know anything. I just always found like the whatever you want to call it, procedural art or generative art, the aspect of it that is 50% control or a little bit more. You can actually, with the parameters, you can actually say, okay, I won't have that much control, but then also there's surprises in the process. So you kind of take yourself out of the creation process a little bit. I always found that very compelling, because I do know that I have biases and I have like things that I go to, and if I mix this in, I can push myself out of it very easily. So it's a bit like if you close your eyes and just draw shit on a paper and then you try to make sense out of it. It feels a bit like that.
Take me through this gallery. I see there's more than one image there.
So yeah, these were just trained on my work. These were like early diffusion models. This is an OpenAI, I think, diffusion model. And it actually resembles how I work quite well already. This took quite a bit of time to train, and obviously it's tiny resolution. But if you know my work, it is close to what I'm doing. So then I was like, the first time I was like, oh wow, this is actually useful. Like this can be actually a tool that can help me to stay in my world but find new stuff.
And I find this approach interesting because it contrasts to many opinions or many attitudes I've seen when those techniques first appeared. And I mean, we're looking at this and it says it's about 90 weeks old, so it's almost 2 years old, which is ancient in AI terms. But your reaction to this I found quite intriguing, because you are the first person I knew that kind of grasped the concept of treating this as a new medium.
Yeah. I think it's just the curiosity that I have. It's not that I'm really thinking about it that much. It's just like, oh, this can push. I wonder what it's going to do with if I put my work in and it interpolates between the styles and stuff.
But that is so unique about you, because you don't seem to have any fear about this thing, quote unquote, stealing your work or your work being stolen or wrongfully appropriated or stuff like that.
Well, there is obviously the not my work personally. I don't want to sit on a certain style and just say, oh, this is mine, no one can do it, or no one can be close to it. First of all, because I also learned from a lot of people, and I'm a culmination of like a lot of stuff that I saw, but it also pushes me to come up with new stuff. So if someone is doing that, then I'm kind of happy about it, because often it also pushes the work in like a different sphere. Again, it's like out of my control, and it takes it where I would never get it, because it's a different person.
Oh, okay, so someone being, let's call it, heavily inspired.
Yeah, exactly. And but I'm also not, like, I also don't think it's a good idea to train these models wholesale on artists and then put the artist name in to replicate something like really literally replicate it.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, because morally I think it's a bit shit, and it's like a shit move to do. Also, it doesn't really move anyone forward. It's like, okay, now you can do the same thing that person already mastered. Why would I also don't know why would that be interesting, apart from all the other implications like economic implications, all that stuff. I also don't think it's very interesting to do that.
Yeah,
like it's not. Why would you do it? I don't like, personally, I don't know what is the motivation. You don't, if you do like there's a lot of like the lady with the pearl earring in millions of variations. I know I can understand that for a technical demo it makes sense, because it shows you what is going on in a very clear way. But as a creative expression, it's not interesting. I personally think it's like often like a bit like, okay, technically I can understand why, like from the developer side, why it's chosen as an iconic thing that you then know, okay, what is actually happening to it, because you know the original. That would be much harder if you don't know the original of an image. So that makes a lot of sense in that context, of course. But
I mean, I'm on the side with you, but I think you could argue that we both were lucky or unlucky to never have worked massively in concept art, where I think people are rightfully scared at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I don't think that a person that has no understanding of how an image works and how it has to be constructed is creating very compelling work, even with this tool. But there is like certain like big, let's say, web-based generators, I don't name any names now, that are so fine-tuned on a certain aesthetic that they might, like, you can almost leave this prompt window like empty and press enter, and you get something that is in traditional terms aesthetically pleasing, but it doesn't really have your input in there, right?
The question is, how do you think, when we're talking about traditionally pleasing or traditionally aesthetic, do you think, and if you do so, that we need to change what we regard as aesthetic, or is that already happening with the advent of these techniques?
Well, what I don't like about this way of working is that it is converging aesthetics to one point, almost like where it is like, I mean, there is a lot of that happening already when you look at like big movies. They converge on
on a Marvel massive epic.
Exactly. And the social media is converging on certain patterns of how to make people engaged with stuff that are so obvious that everyone's like really like, it's like everyone's like, okay, I know exactly what it's like. Oh yeah, I just ate whatever sandwich. Did you eat a sandwich? Post in the comments. And then you're like, okay, we all know the formula now, and it's converging. And that if that happens with aesthetics or even images or sound, or that's just boring. Like that would be sad if it goes, but it for the last couple of months, these bigger generators, they converge, but they also converge knowingly because they want people to be happy about what they generated immediately, right?
So one result or one remark or reply that I often get when I want to, or when I recommend more open source models or different checkpoints to people, is that yes, while it's fine and while they are now able to use them by going through all the hoops that you need to do for those, they still find the quality lacking behind those big web generators.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's if you train on a lot of stuff, and if you train on stuff that is actually generated on the generator itself, so it is actually eating itself a little bit, then at one point you have like a quality that you can definitely reach with open source and different other methods, but it's harder. It's much harder to do though.
What in your opinion then is the argument not to use those pre-trained, rather closed source big web portals and instead go open source and manipulate the tools, build the tools, mingle with them?
Well, I don't want to be like a pointing fingers kind of person. For me personally, what's more interesting in these in the way I work with these open source models, and where it's like really not anymore about the prompt that much, because it is like they are heavily fine-tuned models. They have their own tokens, so it doesn't even make sense, the prompts I use, because I use them more as a parameter for different styles of my work. But also there's like input, like control nets where I put in like viewport renders of 3D work to just guide the work more. And I just feel like, to me, the process is so important to reach like a new interesting aesthetic or result for me, that without the process, I don't really feel like I could get there. But then again, there might be other people that are just doing the prompt thing and feel like they have a process down with that. But personally, for me, it's not getting me there, because it's too much inside of the distribution, and you are at the mercy of the person that trains the model and the bias of the data.
So kind of training your own models and mingling with the algorithms themselves, how they create images, is like self-empowerment in a way.
Yeah, because I bias them obviously heavily on my work on purpose.
I mean, let's talk a bit about technique. I mean, I'm not sure what you want to share, how much you want to share, but you mentioned like your tokens don't have meaning per se in the end.
Yeah, so they just like made up things that I personally like. There's scripts that I came up with, like they are not like super exciting scripts, but it's more like finding words that I think, and this is not like scientifically backed, but just from my experience, like that I don't feel like they have a lot of competition in the model. So if you, for example, have cat, and you have your characters and you train them as a cat, they have a lot of competition because there's a lot of cats in the model already. So I'm using tokens that have no meaning to the model or very little. So I can occupy that space. And I also overtrain, like overfit is the term. But so I just, hammer my work into the model. So if you leave the box empty and press enter, it will look like my stuff. Like it will never look like a vanilla model, and not even close.
But then again, it's your aim at this point is not to train a foundational model with your work.
No, exactly. That's the main thing that is also still like, obviously I'm fine-tuning models, so I'm not training models from scratch, which means there's other images in there. And you have to be honest, without all the other images, the model wouldn't be as good.
Mm-hmm.
But with the amount of training I do on top of that, it's impossible to create work that doesn't look like my work, or at least very close with the model anymore, because I basically destroy it.
Okay, so that means, but you also get around the problem of the model trying to recreate training data that's been in the foundational training data set.
Yeah, because it's heavily altered. Because I also train with what is called dropouts, which is not like, so once in a while in the training process, the prompt is dropped,
Mm-hmm.
and it's training an image without a prompt, so it's going on the whole model.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's more like a general influence
Style, maybe.
Yeah. That's why also the model is generating stuff that looks like my stuff, even if you leave stuff out. So even if you do unconditional generation, it would look like my stuff a lot.
Maybe so maybe let's arrive at present day.
Mm-hmm.
Today. What can you give us an insight in which kind of tools you use, and maybe also what kind of developments currently excite you?
So there's the main tool I use is you could say the main tool is Python, but the main tool is Comfy, at least the Comfy UI. Link in the show notes. That is the main thing I use because it's very close to things like Houdini. It's a node-based interface, so I feel very much at home in there. And you can write your own notes, and it's just a hacky and fun way to create. Like, this is what I like. I don't necessarily need like a super stable kind of thing. it can be very hacky. Yeah, that's the main I think tool for at least the generation, like the AI generative stuff. And then there's Blender, Houdini, ZBrush, Touch Designer. There's a new Pixel, like a Touch Designer like a Pixel version of Touch Designer, which I totally forgot the name of now, which is also really interesting.
Link in the show notes.
Yeah,
I
link
assume.
in the show notes. Yeah.
When it comes to staying relevant or up to date, any sources you can recommend for people who want to follow the whole circus of AI?
Yeah, there's a lot. Like there is the daily papers thing of Hugging Face, which is good. And then there's like a lot of discords and a lot of stuff. If you really want to dive deep, you have to kind of put the work in. Like there's a lot of discords. I don't have any names really, but you will find them relatively quickly. Like I did find them, so there's no magic to finding them. But it's not like, you know how discords work, right? It's not on the surface. You have to go through it and you find information and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's a lot of digging.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. The usual question at the end of these sessions: what did I forget to ask?
What did you? I don't know. I think you did ask all the questions.
I think we've got lots of show notes to catch up with.
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, sure.
And to everyone out there, thanks so much. And as always, it is cheers and goodbye.
Cheers.